Well, you caught me. I realized, man, I'm getting ready to go. I didn't have my Instagram camera set up. And so I was scrambling to get that done before the camera came up on me. And you caught me just as I was getting it done. But it's done. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Okay, it's Friday. I want to remind everybody I will be preaching at my church on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. at 943 Canal Drive. Stop on by. I would love to see you. That's the Call Church. I am the pastor. Not sure what I'm going to be preaching, frankly, this Sunday, because I could go a number of different ways, but I just preached an important 4-part series on history, and I hope you will check that out. The first sermon was Christ in History. The second sermon was Your History in Christ. Third sermon was to be a covenant nation. The fourth sermon was to be a constitutional republic. And I just hope you'll check it out. I think those are important messages for us as Americans to understand the hand of God on the founding of our nation and on what our nation represents to the world and what it ought to represent to every Christian. So I wanted to get that out there. I will be next week at Answers in Genesis Ministers Conference. Going to happen at the Ark in, I think it's Williamstown, Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're going to be there, I hope to see you. And if you're in the area and haven't decided that you're going to come, but you want to come, I'm pretty sure space is still open and available for you to sign up and come. That is where I will be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, which means that I will not be doing live programs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. I also want to mention to you that American Family Radio, I'm a podcast host on American Family Radio now. Still, the awakening is still going on, but I'm doing it once a week now as a podcast. But we are holding our Share-a-thon next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week also. And I will be appearing on some of the radio programs to participate in Share-a-thon next week. So please be sure to tune in to American Family Radio next week and support our Share-a-thon. Okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this particular issue, but I do want to touch on it because it has come up, and that is IVF, in vitro fertilization. Now, let me just say as a disclaimer, I'm not an expert on this. I have not studied this thoroughly. So I speak advisedly about it, and I speak with some humility about it. Let me say in general, first of all, because right now, of course, Trump has gone way overboard and said, in my view, way overboard and said the government's going to pay for in vitro fertilization for people. I don't think the government should be doing that. I don't think that's a constitutional role of our government to be facilitating people with difficulties in bearing children, getting those issues resolved by the government writing a check. Again, it's not that we don't want people who have difficulty with having children to be able to have them and to take advantage of whatever scientific progress we're able to make to help that happen. It's not that you don't want that. It's that it's not the role of government to do it. But again, I think former President Trump has been hit hard with, along with the whole killing unborn babies issue, and he's kind of pulled back from a more aggressive approach to protecting unborn babies. In vitro fertilization is sort of a related issue. So at any rate, with that out of the way, let me just say I am not against in vitro fertilization as a concept at all. Because look, when people want to have children and they have difficulties with having children for whatever reason, And if science can do something to help facilitate those people being able to have children, I am all for it as a general proposition, okay? As a general proposition. I mean, I could also, and should also say, I believe, the Bible has a number of stories about women who thought they could not have children, but were touched by the hand of God and then ended up having not just sometimes in some cases, not just one child, but multiple children. So we really ought to learn to trust God here first and foremost, okay, rather than turning to science, trusting God. However, as a general proposition, and I know there are different people of different, shall we say, doctrinal positions or faith positions who don't believe in going to doctors at all. They believe that if you go to a doctor, that's a lack of faith. I don't believe that at all. I have medical checkups. If something goes wrong, I want the doctor to give me a sense if he can tell me what is happening with my body. It doesn't mean I'm always going to take to it. Whatever the doctor tells me to do, I'm going to do it, or whatever the doctor tells me to take, I'm going to take it, because I really believe that God is my ultimate healer. However, and now this is just me, this is just E.W. Jackson talking, okay? And I'm not representing any kind of doctrinal position by anybody. I'm just telling you my own personal conviction about this. I'm going to come back to IVF, but I want to set this context. I really believe that going to a doctor and having x-rays or tests or getting whatever you need, for me, if I learn something about what's happening with my body that I didn't know, it helps me to know how to pray. It helps me to be very focused on what I should be praying about. Maybe you all have heard me tell the story about the desmoid tumor that I had. It started with a small lump on my lower abdomen, just beneath my pec, right down here in the rib cage area, upper rib cage area. And I thought it was some kind of muscle spasm. But when it didn't go away, I thought, well, let me just check it out and see what's going on. And of course, they did a biopsy and found that it was a desmoid tumor, what they call an aggressive fibromatosis, which is, it's in the cancer family, which means these cells begin to grow out of control, and unless there's something done to arrest them, they will literally grow and take over your body. Might be a little bit too dramatic, but there have been people who've had these things grow to the size of watermelons on their bodies. Let me put it that way. That's how bad they can become. Okay. Well, I wouldn't have known that without going to the doctor. So now I know exactly what I'm praying about. Now I know exactly what ails me. I know exactly what's going on in my body, and I know exactly how to pray about it. Now that may not work for everybody. Some people would say, I don't know, I don't need that. I just believe God for my healing. And that's fine. I'm not ridiculing that at all. Let every person be persuaded in his own mind. But for me, it helps me because now I can be laser focused on that. And of course, you all know that when that thing grew ultimately to the size of a grapefruit on my chest, and the doctor told me they're going to have to take out my ribs and to give me skin grafts and go through all this stuff, a 12-hour operation, I made the decision under the leadership of the Holy Spirit. Now, I didn't just kind of do this cavalierly. I had a serious talk with God about this, in fact, more than one, and came under the absolute conviction. I don't mean just, well, maybe, but the absolute conviction that God had healed me, that I was healed, that God was going to take care of it. I didn't need to have the operation. The doctor told me if I didn't have the operation, I was going to die. I didn't have the operation. I'm still alive. And that was 13 years ago that I got diagnosed with it, 13 years ago. God removed it. I have no tumor. They've checked it with MRIs, and I have no tumor. God removed it. The first little one they tried to remove by surgery, I'm thinking, yeah, that's easy enough to do. Boom, get it out of the way. And it came back because they missed 1 cell, 2 cells, whatever they missed. Boom, it came back. And only this time it came back even stronger, bigger, more aggressive. I said all that simply to say, I am not against medical science, okay? I'm not one of these people who say, I don't want to have, I don't have any trust whatsoever in medicine or science. That's not my position. However, the wisdom of God is greater than science. The wisdom of God is greater than medicine. And I don't put my trust in medical professionals for anything. I give them due respect for what they know, understanding that they know very, very little. Now, they may know a lot about medicine and physiology and anatomy compared to me. But compared to God, they know absolutely nothing. And so I take what they have to say under advisement. I pray about it, and I seek the guidance of Almighty God for what I should do about any issues that I am confronting. Now, with that out of the way, somebody needed to hear that, though. You know what? I get on these what appear to be tangents, but they're not really tangents. They're Holy Spirit-led comments that the Lord wants somebody to hear who desperately needs to hear it. So with in vitro fertilization, I am not against the science that allows medicine to help people who want to get pregnant to overcome whatever physiological or biological impediments there might be. However, that's a general proposition, but there are some very serious ethical issues at stake. And we can't pretend there aren't. The production of multiple fertilized eggs or embryos that end up getting discarded like trash, to me, or potentially do. They might say, well, they're frozen, but eventually, at some point, unless those embryos are going to be allowed to be implanted, that, as far as I am concerned, is a nascent human being that is simply being used as a scientific experiment and thrown away as if life really doesn't matter and there's nothing sacred about it. That's a major ethical issue, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Just because science can do something doesn't mean it should. You say, well, doesn't that contradict what you just said? You basically, you're not against in vitro fertilization. I'm not. But I do think that there are some major ethical issues that need to be resolved, that we can't just rush headlong into it as if it doesn't raise these kinds of issues. It also raises issues of people trying to genetically engineer certain kinds of children that they want. To me, there's something monstrous about that. It raises issues about surrogacy when someone is using someone else's biological and genetic material to be implanted into a woman. So, say a man who cannot father children uses another man's sperm to fertilize the egg of his wife. That man whose seed was used, what rights did that man have? Because that man actually is going to have a child. Now you can say all you want about, well, but it's not, this is different. No, it's not different. I think there is a biological reality that cannot be ignored. And here again, that's another one of those ethical issues that needs to be resolved. Because to me, it's major. And to be very honest, I think we as Christians at least have to raise the question whether that kind of thing is not a kind of adultery. Because basically, another man's sperm is really being injected into the wife of another man in order to have a child that will never be that man, her husband's biological child. I mean, that gives me the willies. I think there's a major issue with that, and I don't think you can square that with Scripture. I really don't. So again, that's a general proposition for it, but major ethical issues with it, and wouldn't go forward without those issues being resolved. And certainly don't think the government ought to be paying for this stuff anyway, because I think that's where the potential, once again, for abuse of power and manipulating people and creating dependence in people and trying to be God to people, in effect. Okay, want to get that out of the way. Spent longer on that than I intended to, but perhaps, in fact, I know in my spirit somebody watching needed to hear that. All right, I want to come back now to a theme for today's program, and the theme basically is the Democrat abuse of power. You know, I've said this before, and folks, I really believe Republicans can abuse power too. I want you all to understand that. I don't think, the Democrats are demonic and all Republicans are saints. I don't believe that, not for a minute. I mean, look, Liz Cheney's out here campaigning for Comrade Kamala. Oh, and I guess Jake Tapper said it's not Kamala, it's Kamala. Kamala, you say Kamala, I say Kamala. What? Oh my goodness gracious! You wonder. I wonder how her mother and father pronounced it. What they intended, because to me, it's ridiculous. As if saying, implying, I guess, as if saying Kamala, which is the way I pronounce it. And I haven't been pronouncing it that way because I think it's some kind of insult of some kind. But the implication is, that's maybe you're being a racist. Lord have mercy. It was like, remember saying Barack Hussein Obama? Well, that's his middle name. But here again. So my point is, the Democrat Party as a party is obsessed with power. The Republican Party, at least generally speaking, I think, understands that the purpose of the Constitution is to limit the power of government and its power over the people. The Democrats think that's a flaw, that's a problem, that government should have as much power over people as it can grab, which is really a violation and in contradiction of everything this nation represents. I mean, in that sense, these people completely betray the spirit of America. I mean, they just completely betray it. Just like Harvard betrays John Harvard's vision of Harvard as a school for training ministers and sending ministers across this continent and ultimately the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and others, same deal. Other universities, Yale, Columbia, all started with a spiritual mission which was perverted and subverted and ultimately completely eliminated so that they could pursue a godless agenda with these institutions. They betrayed those who founded them. And the Democrat Party is now betraying what this country was intended to be, how it was founded, what the Constitution means, what the role of government. They are in rank treason against all of that. And I use the word treason, of course, here, not as a legal word in this case, but as a statement of their spiritual and cultural condition. They are committing treason against the spirit of this nation. And I wanted to look at this a little bit as a theme and some things that are now happening. Now, here are the words of the Constitution that go to what I want to talk about. Of course, we're familiar with the first part of this, and most of us are probably familiar with the entire line. They said, we hold these, the Founding Fathers said in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, here's the sentence I want to give emphasis to. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the government, of the governed. Now that line indicated that the founding fathers believed that rights and liberties come, that whole, the couple of lines, rights and liberties come from Almighty God. We know that, check. But they also added this very important caveat about the role of government in securing those rights. That the just powers of government are derived from the consent of the governed, which completely flips everything the world had understood at this point, which is that the sovereignty of a nation is not in the hands of a king or an emperor or a parliament. The sovereignty of the government, the sovereignty of the nation belongs to the people. Consent means they delegate the right to govern themselves. They delegate some of that authority to a government to do things for the entire body politic that no individual can do. Now, the first three words of the Constitution are then "we the people," which to me is derived directly from the quote I just shared with you. We the people. Not we the politicians, not we the pundits, not we the experts, but we the people. And then, of course, it goes on in order to form a more perfect union and so forth. The prosecution of Donald Trump is in direct defiance of these words, because Jack Smith is trying to use the government to destroy a political opponent, who, by the way, that opponent named Donald Trump, has all the rights and the liberty that are enunciated in the Constitution of the United States and in the Declaration of Independence. He is no different than you and I in that way. He has more money than most of us, and he certainly has more notoriety and more influence than most of us. Probably got a lot more enemies than most of us too. But in this sense, being a citizen of a government that is supposed to be restrained in its ability to persecute and prosecute its citizens, his rights and liberties are being completely trampled. And Jack Smith is one of the main malefactors here. Because look, and this judge, by the way, who just allowed him to release this report on the charges against Donald Trump. Now, this is what I mean, folks. There's been an unspoken rule that you don't release reports like what's just been released on charges and all this kind of stuff just before an election. It's been an unwritten rule. We've verified. That's not written down anywhere, but it's been a practice. And why? Because the people are about to speak. And the government, as the servant, not the master of the people, steps back and allows the people to speak, rather than stepping in and saying, no, we're going to speak for the people, and we're going to interfere with the people's ability to speak for themselves by interjecting this in the middle of an election. It's a violation of the very spirit of that, the consent of the governed. Well, the governed are about to speak. Between now, early voting's already started, but between now and November 8th, the government, I think it's November 8th, isn't it? The governed are about to speak. Sorry about that, November 5th. The governed are about to speak. And instead of allowing that process to go forward unfettered, unhindered, without undue interference, they released this report. Now, So first of all, they violated a tradition, a rule. That's number one. But this judge, Tanya Chutkin, also violated a written rule. The written rule was that these kinds of briefs, if you will, were supposed to be no longer than 45 pages. Okay, and by the way, this is the U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. You know what that is. That's a cesspool. That's a hellhole of demonic leftist thinking. But made an exception and allowed this man to release, 165 pages, I believe. 165-page report reiterating all of the accusations. By the way, one-sided, completely one-sided accusations against Donald Trump. Now, why would she make an exception and say, oh, yeah, you can go beyond the normal 45 pages because we really need you to see if you can torpedo Donald Trump's presidency? So as far as I'm concerned, this judge is corrupt. Because if anything, you would think the judge would be restrained and say, well, now, wait a minute. You got an election coming up, and I can't make an exception for you. If I were even inclined to do it, I certainly couldn't do it now because that will be perceived as putting my thumb on the scale of the election. And I'm not going to do that. That's not my job. But oh no, the two of them colluded and happily tried to put their thumb on the scale of the election. You see what I'm getting at? They have no respect for the sovereignty of the people. They have no respect for the fact that it's the people who are ultimately the delegators of power to the government. It's the difference, again, between tyranny and a constitutional republic. Tyranny, which says we rule over the people and we will do what we want to do and the people will accept it and we'll force them to accept it if they resist. That's sadly what we've got. Jack Smith is just a political hack. That's all he is. He's just a political hack. He's a political hitman. And he's been sent out there, see if you can bring Trump down. I mean, that's the marching orders. It doesn't matter whether he's done anything wrong. See if you can bring him down. Do what you can. All these charges about, having unlawfully held these classified documents have been dropped. But find something else. See what you can do to bring this man down. Charges of campaign violations being brought by a local district attorney for rules and regulations that are federal in nature and normally are brought, if they have to be brought or need to be brought, by the Federal Election Commission and the Justice Department. They wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, but they send this political hack, Alvin Bragg, out there to try to bring Trump down. No respect whatsoever for the sovereignty of the people. No respect whatsoever for the fact that they are supposed to be servants of the people, not our rulers and not our masters. They're busy trying to destroy Donald Trump, and they don't care that every poll shows that at least half the people, and I think the election will show more than half the people respect Donald Trump and want Donald Trump to be president of the United States in spite of all these leftists have thrown at him. So there's the first example. It just violates the spirit of the country, the spirit of who we are, the spirit of who our founding fathers designed this country to be in order to protect your liberty and mine. Here's another example. We have spent $1.4 billion on illegal immigrants. I really think it's more than that. When I read a number like that, I say, yeah, you probably multiply that 2 or 3 times. They're lying to us. And so Homeland Security said FEMA is out of money. That maybe they can get us through this Hurricane Helene crisis, but if anything else happens, they're up the creek without a paddle because they've been too busy spending money on illegal aliens. They've been too busy facilitating the invasion of our country. Here again, the consent of the governed. Have the people consented to this major influx of people from foreign countries? Have you? Has anybody? No. Well, wait a minute. Then how are they doing it? They don't care whether you consent or not. This is what they want to do. They think it's a pathway to power for them, and so they're doing it. It is a violation of the very spirit of this nation, which is supposed to be governed by a government that serves the people and understands that it operates with the delegated consent of the people. They are not our rulers. They are not our masters. They are our servants. But you can't tell the Democrat Party that, because according to Hillary Clinton, those who will not submit to Queen Hillary are just a basket of deplorables. And she recently doubled down on it and said, well, they're probably worse than I. That was probably mild. And so here you have Americans suffering, starving, thirsty, without shelter, homes washed away in this flood, and the federal government talking about being out of money. And if you believe the Biden administration, of course, as always, they said the same thing about Afghanistan. You know, we did a masterful job. It was a great job. Yeah, they're saying the same thing about what they're doing in Florida and North Carolina. But if you ask the people in North Carolina out around Asheville in that area, what they're saying is, where's the federal government? We haven't seen them. Roads washed away, cell phone systems out. They even blocked Elon Musk's satellite link from providing cell phone service to the people in the area so they could communicate with each other. They blocked that because they see Elon Musk as an enemy. They don't care what happens to the people as long as you punish your political enemies. That is precisely the kind of power the Founding Fathers did not want the government to have. But when you've got the spirit of tyranny operating, you don't care what the Founding Fathers want. You don't care what the people want. You don't care what the people vote. You don't care what the people say, think, and you don't care what happens to them. You care about what you must do in order to advance your own power. And if punishing Elon Musk is what you must do, and people have to suffer while you punish Elon Musk, so be it. Deal with it. You know, I said in a recent message, the idea that the power of government should be limited in order to protect the liberty of the people was a revolutionary idea. I'm not saying some political theorists might not have thought of it, but no one had ever implemented it. No one had ever founded a country on that basis until the United States of America. And you've got people in office today who could care less about that revolutionary idea, that founding principle, and they will just grab power every which way they can. I mean, did you see Adam Pencil Neck Schiff now talking about, yeah, we've got to censor disinformation, which is rich, coming from the guy who said, I have evidence, I have proof that Donald Trump colluded with Russia. Oh, really? Show it to us. It's in my own head. It's in my own delusions. I mean, the man is wicked. Hey, did you hear that former majority leader, Harry, it'll come to me, but you know what I'm talking about, said that what he said about Mitt Romney, nobody to write home about either, about his not having paid taxes, I forget what he said, 12 years or something like that. He admitted before he died, he just made it up. Just made it up. in order to damage Mitt Romney. It was a complete and total fabrication. He knew it and said it anyway. Harry Reid. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Harry Reid. It is a complete violation of everything this nation represents. And, you know, this is where you and I are at such a gross disadvantage as Christians, as people of moral principle, because I could not tell a lie about an opponent in order to advance what I consider to be my ambition, because I know I've got to stand before God. And the Bible says God hates a lying tongue, hates it. I mean, I would be betraying God to say, well, I got this, I'm going to say this. I know it's not true, but who cares? It's going to hurt him. That's why I say, folks, these people are demonic. They are demonic. So that's just another example of betraying the people in order to, because why are they doing this? Of course, they're doing this for all of these illegal aliens, these invaders, because they think they're going to be a new power base for them. That's all. I mean, again, very few, no Democrat will say this, even though they know it's true, and very few Republicans will say it. They ought to be saying to the American people, they are betraying you, they are stabbing you in the back because they think this is a way for them to get power. Don't forget that. They could care less about you. If you're supportive of them, they've already got you. If you're not, what they're really seeking to do is displace you with people who will be, so that they can rule over you with the help of those people. That's what it boils down to. The difference between a government that rules over you doing whatever it wants and a government that serves you with the consent of the people. Here's another example. Now, you all know, right, that Biden sought to, now some of this was challenged and litigated, but Biden tried to change Title IX, and I think some of this is in place, so that, which was designed to protect women, so that they would have an equal opportunity to use sports facilities and in other ways not be discriminated against. They've changed the regulations of Title IX. They can't change Title IX so easily, but they changed the regulations of Title IX to allow now for gender identity, and to say in effect that any person should be allowed to play any sport that they say their identity matches with. So when a guy, I mean, he could be a 215-pound, imagine this, a 215-pound, 6'2" guy says he's a woman and wants to play on the women's sports teams. And you think, and the women's sports teams that he wants to play on, the women are averaging 125, 130 pounds, and they're averaging somewhere between 5'2" and 5'4", 5'5". He's 6'2". And you say, well, has it gotten that bad? Yeah. William Thomas, a.k.a. Leah, which I refuse to call him because he's a guy. Well, and then telling women, the consent of the governed, telling women, oh, you don't like it? Oh, well, there's something wrong with you. Because we've decided this is what's good and this is what's right and this is what we're going to do whether you like it or not. And I guarantee you the overwhelmingly, the American people do not think biological men should be playing sports with biological women. Overwhelmingly. But these Democrats don't care because they think they know what's best. And they've forgotten the fundamental principle of the nation, of its founding, which is we are governed with the consent, by the consent of the governed. Not ruled over by the governors or the government, but served by the government with our consent. And so you got this team of high school girls, the soccer team, who refused to play up in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire has this rule now, but they refused to play because another soccer team brought on a guy calling himself a girl. This is the Hillsborough Deering High School girls varsity soccer team. They boycotted against Kearsarge Regional High School, which has a guy on their soccer team. But he identifies. I mean, you know, I was talking to somebody not too long ago who was telling me about a friend whose child thinks he's a cat. And I know, folks, you just think that's ridiculous. But no, this is serious. He thinks he's a cat. Because, you know, whatever identity you choose, right? And these leftists would tell you, well, you got to honor his identity. So what now? What's his pronoun? Meow? You're going to lose your job because when he comes to school, you can't call him by his name. You got to call him meow. I mean, this stuff it's so it's one thing if people want to live that way, they want to have these kind of private, weird ideas. But when the government steps in and says, oh, no. This is going to be under sanction of law. You must recognize this. And your daughter, your granddaughter must play with this guy because he says he's a girl and we recognize his right with all of his male accoutrements to claim to be a girl and to play and compete with your daughter and your granddaughter, whether you like it or not. It's a violation of everything this country was based on. Here's another situation of a volleyball player has sued the NCAA because they included on their team at Jose State University a man, once again, identifying, though, as a woman. The guy is 6'1". And they didn't tell anybody they were doing it because why? What do you need to know for? You're just a pawn in their game. And suddenly this guy appears on the field. And the women are saying, whoa, time out. How did this happen? Well, it happened because he says he's a girl. He says he's a woman. He's a woman. Yeah, but we don't consent. Well, too bad. You don't get to have any say because you're not being governed with the consent of the governed. You're being ruled over by a bunch of tyrants who can tell you that your daughter will be put at risk for physical harm in interaction with a guy who may be 50, 60 pounds heavier than she is, have the musculature of a man, has all the accoutrements of a man, but he says he's a woman, and therefore your daughter is going to be put at risk, whether you like it or not, because we say so. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz get elected? That's what we're looking at, folks. That is what we're looking at. No more the consent of the governed. It's now going to be the rulership of the elitists, the tyrants. I mean, Tim Walz has said, you know, freedom of speech doesn't cover hate speech, doesn't cover misinformation. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Well, that is a very, very narrow exception. But you can't threaten someone. You can't say, I'm going to shoot you. That's a terroristic threat. That's entirely different than saying, I disagree with homosexuality. I think it's wrong. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't say that. I believe that so-called abortion is the killing of an unborn baby. Whoa, no, that's hate speech. You're hating women. You're trying to violate women's reproductive rights. When it's not an issue of trying to reproduce, it's an issue of trying not to reproduce. Or if you say, that guy is a guy. I don't care how much makeup and wig, what kind of wig he puts on, and what kind of outfit he puts on. It's a guy, and his name is Bob. That's hate speech. You gotta call him Barbara, and you got to use his chosen pronoun, which is Z or she, or you're going to lose your job. And the government's going to take it from you. How's that? Does that sound like the consent of the governed to you? No, it's not. And on and on and on it goes. And COVID, folks, was the ultimate testament to the tyranny of the Democrat Party. Now, look, don't get me wrong. Like I said, Republicans are not immune from this. That's why we've got to be skeptical about all government, no matter who's running it, no matter who's in charge. We have to have some skepticism, a healthy skepticism of government, so that it doesn't abuse its power because it is inclined to do so. But what's going on right now is so far from what the Founding Fathers intended, and so far from protecting and defending our liberty, that it's disturbing. I refuse to be frightened, because God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. But I'll tell you what, it is disturbing enough to make you want to fight. Now, of course, I'm referring to fighting the good fight of faith. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Look, as I go, I want to say happy Rosh Hashanah to all of our Jewish friends out there. They just began to celebrate their Jewish New Year. Let me see, was that Monday? What day was the Jewish New Year? Let me get it right. I don't want to mess this up. I know it was this week. But happy Rosh Hashanah to them. It was on, began the evening of October the 2nd. The evening of October the 2nd. And so, happy Rosh Hashanah to all of our Jewish friends out there. God bless each and every one of you. You know what we have to do. Folks, if you haven't voted yet, if early voting in your state, get out there and vote. If you're not planning to vote early, make sure you make a plan so that you don't forget to vote. Get everybody you can of like mind to get out and vote. Work those polls. Find out what you need to do to work those polls and make sure that there are no shenanigans and cheating going on. Because here again, when people do not have a moral core, they are willing to do anything to further their own agenda because they consider themselves to be so enlightened and so important and so superior that if they have to lie, steal, and cheat to get what they want, you will inure the benefit, and so it's worth it. Now, thinking just like all good communists are supposed to think. So please get fully engaged and fully involved, not just with voting. I talk to people every day about contributing to our efforts in behalf of Donald Trump through our PAC, Stand America PAC. Go to standamericapac.us if you want to give to that effort, standamericapac.us. We are already buying ads in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars in order to get the black community to understand Kamala Harris will be the bane of your existence. If you want hardship over the next 4 years, if you want to see a country in shambles, and you are going to be the worst affected, those of you who live maybe at the margin or maybe just above poverty or maybe even below poverty at this point, look out. You're going to get hit with a tsunami of devastating consequences if this woman and her running mate get into office. They'll bankrupt the country. They'll flood the country with illegal aliens. They'll kill unborn babies with an absolutely unfettered abandon. They will have all your girls and your boys, your children and your grandchildren thinking that they have to figure out whether they're a boy or a girl, and then to get hormones and operations, which the government will happily pay for. And Tim Walz's Minnesota says, and if you won't let them do it, Minnesota will be a transgender sanctuary state, so they can come and they will take temporary custody of your child to inject your child with hormones, to give your child an operation against your will. That's Tim Walz. That's tyranny, folks. That's tyranny. Who do they think they are to step in the middle of your family and take over your child's life? Because, of course, they really believe they're so superior. Again, you as a father or mother are too stupid to know what your child needs. But they, as the enlightened ones, know what is best. Oh, it's just thoroughly disgusting. Pray for America. Pray for these wicked people who want to lead America off the spiritual and moral cliff. And pray for Donald Trump and for J.D. Vance to be safe, and for this country to choose them to lead us as president and vice president over the next 4 years. They're not perfect, but if you compare them to the alternative, whew, it's like sunshine versus the deepest, darkest, blackest night. God bless you all. I got to go. Wow, I'm way over. But stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up, because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side. God bless everybody.